All right, so first let's talk some logistics on the quiz. Obviously it covers 11.1 to 11.3. You can use a scientific calculator the whole time. So scientific calc the whole time. What? No, not your graphing one, your scientific one. And if you don't have a scientific one, you can take your, like the quiz will be on lockdown, and lockdown will provide you with a scientific calculator. It's just not as like user friendly as this guy. It's like using your iPhone turned sideways, that one. That would be what it looks like on lockdown. I would say obviously if you had a handheld scientific one, it would be better to use that. So 11.1 was where we got introduced to the limits. I would say 11.1 and 11.2 kind of blended together. As far as the limits goes, you would want to be able to identify a limit from a graph. You would want to be able to identify a limit from an equation in which you can just direct substitute, and also one in which you have to simplify it before you direct substitute. So like in something like number 3, you could literally just plug 2 in there. But in something like number 4, if I plug in that -3, I'm going to get 0 in the denominator, and then I can't use that method. I'd have to factor and solve it. Same with 6, you're going to have to factor. And then something like 5, you have to multiply by the conjugate. So I'd multiply by 1 plus the square root of 1 minus x over x. If you want me to work through an example, I don't want to work through this one because I want you to actually do it. But I'll work through one of something like that, okay? Then came the limits if you were actually given the limit. So like the properties of limits, we could add the limits, we could subtract the limits, you could multiply, you could divide, you could square it. Like all those things can be done if you're given the limit as it is. So in that case, I gave you the limit to f of x was -3, the limit to g of x was 10, and then you could use those to answer any kind of question based on those.
So multiple choice?
It is multiple choice. It is 10 questions.
All of it?
All of it. Yep. Also know the 3 ways that a limit does not exist. So how does it not exist from a graph?
If it isn't going towards the same point.
Okay, so it's approaching 2 different y values. How else?
If it's going to infinity.
If it's unbounded, either up or down. What's the third? I mean, it's not that common, but it exists. The oscillating guy, right? The one that goes up and down, kind of like a little squished sine or cosine curve. Okay, those are the 3 ways that a limit would not exist. Questions? So if it was from a piecewise function, just be careful as far as where it asks because, oh, I needed to give you, which I think happens. Okay, then we got into 11.3, and 11.3 was the one where you had to find the derivative and you had to find the equation to find the slope at a point, and then also how to find the slope at that point. So when I taught it, I taught you both methods, the long way, the f of x plus h minus the f of x over h, and then finding the limit as h approaches 0. That's like the long way to do it. Obviously, I want you to be familiar that way because you're going to see it again, but for the quiz purposes tomorrow, you can use the shortcuts. So you can find the derivative, then use that to find your slope. So like if it said something like, for example, like number 8, I'm not going to do number 8, but so you can actually do it. But let's say I gave you f of x equals 2x, oh, let me do different numbers, 3x squared minus x. And I said to find the slope at -1, 3. So the first thing you can do, again, this is that whole process of x plus h minus f of x over h, then make h 0. You could go through that whole long process. You could also just find the derivative. So I'm going to bump this guy forward. That would be 6x. It reduces 1, so to the first. And then this is 1, bumps forward, so it's -1, and then subtract the 1, and that becomes x to the 0, so the variable goes away. That is the equation you would use to find the slope. So that's part 1. Then if I want to actually find the slope, it's going to give you the coordinate point, at least give you the x. It could also say it could say -1, comma, f of -1, because that's the same thing. And then I would plug in -1, so 6 times -1 minus 1, -6 minus 1, which is -7. So equation to give you the slope, and then actual slope. Again, you could go the long way. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could do f of x plus h minus f of x all over h, simplify it out. That's the equation, or make h 0. That's the equation for the slope, and then plug in your -2, or in this case, -1. Yeah.
Shortcut for the other one, right?
What do you mean?
Like, because if it's saying, don't you have to find the slope first and then do something?
No, you're finding the equation to find the slope, which is what that is. And then you're finding the slope, which is that.
But for like the ones where it's not the derivative, you can't, there's no shortcut.
That's that same thing.
Oh, so you just do the same thing for
Correct. F of x plus h minus f of x over h as h approaches 0 is your
So I
derivative.
don't have to work on the whole like canceling out the h's thing.
Correct. You could do either one. Yeah. And if you had time, you were bored, you know, maybe you do the other one and check your answer. Okay.
So the derivative is only the equation,
The
right?
derivative is the equation after you make h 0. So like if I were to do it the long way, and then do the limit as it approaches 0, that result is the derivative. So it would be 3x plus h squared minus x plus h minus 3x squared minus x all over h. And then x plus h squared is x squared plus 2xh plus h squared minus x minus h minus 3x squared plus x. This is 3x squared plus 6xh plus 3h squared minus x minus h minus 3x squared plus x. And then the 3x squared, negative 3x squared cancels, positive x, negative x cancels, and 6xh plus 3h squared minus h goes over h. And then the h cancels, and I get 6x plus 3h minus 1. And then I make h 0.
So
6x minus 1.
So that saves so much time.
Yep, it's the same answer. So again, it would be the limit as h approaches 0, so you got to make h 0 at the end. You are going to have to do that process in calc, but for tomorrow's quiz, we're not going to worry about it. And then again, you would plug in your x value there to get the slope of the line. And then you're going to get derivatives. Like these are obviously examples. We did one with square roots. We like all those things that were in the homework. I would be prepared for any kind of those derivatives. Questions? Yeah.
So we wouldn't have to use the f of x plus
Nope.
at all.
Nope. Yep.
For the homework, it shows one fraction. I don't have a picture in it, but it's
So the x to the third goes to the top, and when it does, it becomes x to the negative third. Then the negative 3 multiplies by the 7, so I get negative 21x, and I subtract 1 from here, so it's negative 4. And then you can't leave your exponents negative. So the x to the negative 4 goes back down to the bottom. So it'd be negative 21 over x to the fourth. Because when you brought it to the top, it was negative 3. Negative 3 minus 1 would be negative 4. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions from the homeworks from last week? Because obviously we didn't really get time to go over that stuff. This would be your opportunity. Yeah.
One with the square root.
Okay. So was this yours? Was it square root x plus 1?
Mine was x plus 5.
Plus 5. Okay. So that exponent is a 1/2, right? Because it's a square root. The 1/2 bumps forward. So it's 1/2 times x plus 5. And 1/2 minus 1 would be minus 2 over 2, negative 1/2. And then the 1/2 is a square root, but it's a negative exponent. So it brings it to the bottom as a positive, and then it becomes a square root.
Wait, why is there 2 at the corner?
That's the 1/2 from bumping it forward. So like if I kept it separate, it would have been this, but it won't be written like that. It would be written together like that.
Can we do a conjugate thing?
Bring forward the exponent and then subtract 1 from the exponent. Yeah.